The war room fell silent as Lieutenant Hana Kong stood before the holographic display. Her hands moved across the control panel, and red markers appeared on the star map. Around the long metal table, 15 officers watched her. Most of them were not human. Their scales, feathers, and crystalline skin reflected the blue light from the display. "The Thrain fleet will attack here," Hana said, pointing to the Helion system. "They've hit our supply lines 3 times in the last month. Each time, they retreat before we can respond. They're not running away. They're studying our response time." Captain Velrith, the Alcarian fleet commander, made a clicking sound with his throat sacs. It was how his species laughed. "The human thinks she understands Thrain tactics better than our strategic computers." Several other alien officers joined in the laughter. Hana felt her face grow warm, but she continued. "Our computers analyze past battles, but the Thrain are changing their pattern. If we position our heavy cruisers here and here, we can." "Enough." Commander Tae-Won Park stood up. He was human, like Hana, but he had been with the Coalition much longer. "Lieutenant Kong, your theory is based on guesswork. We have centuries of military data. The Thrain have always favored frontal assault. Sir, with respect, that data is outdated. In the last 6 months, I said enough." Tae-Won's voice was sharp. He looked around the table at the alien officers. "I apologize for this waste of time. Lieutenant Kang is young and inexperienced. She doesn't understand how fleet operations work." Hana felt something break inside her chest. Her own commander, her own species, was throwing her aside to look good in front of the aliens. Captain Velrith waved one of his 4 arms. "Perhaps the humans need better training before they join strategic discussions." "No offense intended, Commander Park." "None taken, Captain." Tae-Won sat down, not looking at Hana. "We'll proceed with the standard defensive formation." Hana gathered her datapad and left the room. Behind her, she heard more laughter. In the corridor, she leaned against the cold metal wall and closed her eyes. She had spent 3 weeks analyzing the Thrain patterns. She knew she was right, but no one would listen to a junior human officer. "Hey!" A quiet voice made her open her eyes. Ensign Juho Nam stood nearby, looking uncomfortable. He was also human, fresh out of the academy. "For what it's worth, your plan made sense to me." "Thanks," Hana said. "But it doesn't matter what we think, does it?" Jiho looked down at his boots. "Commander Park knows how things work here. Humans are still the new species. We have to be careful not to make waves. Even if people die because we stay quiet." Jiho didn't answer. He walked away, leaving Hana alone in the corridor. 2 days later, Hana sat at her new station. After the meeting, Captain Velrith had reassigned her to monitoring duty. She watched screens showing long-range sensors. It was boring work, usually given to first-year ensigns. It was meant to be punishment. The fleet moved into position around Helion Prime. Hana watched the tactical display from her monitoring station. 12 Coalition cruisers, 37 smaller ships, all arranged in the standard defensive formation. It was exactly what the Thrain would expect. Her screen beeped. Long-range sensors detected movement. The Thrain fleet was arriving. Hana counted their ships. 15 heavy cruisers, more than expected. They came in fast, approaching from the north. "Contact bearing 047, she reported into her com. 15 Thrain cruisers. "Confirmed," came the response from Tactical. "All ships prepare for engagement." Hana watched the Thrain fleet approach. They were moving in their standard attack formation. Everything looked normal. Then something on her sensor screen caught her attention. 3 smaller Thrain ships were breaking away from the main group. They were moving around the Coalition fleet's left flank. "Wait," Hana said into her com. 3 Thrain scouts breaking formation. They're moving to Grid 77 Alpha. We see them, Lieutenant, a tactical officer responded. Probably reconnaissance. Maintain your station. But Hannah kept watching. The scouts weren't doing reconnaissance. They were positioning themselves exactly where she had predicted, behind the Coalition fleet. She checked her other sensors. More Thrain ships were appearing on long range. These weren't scouts. They were heavy carriers. Tactical, this is Kong. I'm detecting 6 additional Thrain carriers entering the system. Grid 77 through 82. They're positioning for a rear attack. Impossible. Captain Velrith's voice came through the comm. Our strategic computers show no carriers in this sector. Sir, they're on my screen right now. If we don't reposition Lieutenant, you will maintain communication discipline. Tactical, ignore that report. All ships, engage the main Thrain force. Hannah stared at her screen in horror. The Coalition ships were turning to face the Thrain cruisers in front of them. Behind them, the 6 carriers were launching fighter wings. Hundreds of small attack craft poured out like angry insects. Captain, please, Hannah said, knowing it was useless. They're right behind us. We need to turn the fleet. Lieutenant Kong, you are relieved of monitoring duty. Report to your quarters immediately. Tae-1's voice was angry. Security, escort Lieutenant Kong from her station. 2 security officers appeared. They weren't rough, but they made sure Hannah left. As she walked away, she could still see the tactical display on the wall screens throughout the corridor. She watched the Thrain fighters hit the Coalition fleet from behind. The Coalition ships were caught completely unprepared. Their shields were facing the wrong direction. The Thrain fighters tore through them like paper. 3 cruisers exploded in the first minute. Then 2 more. The Coalition fleet tried to turn, but they were too slow and too disorganized. Hannah reached her quarters and sat on her bunk. She could feel the ship shaking as weapons fire hit their shields. Alarms were ringing throughout the vessel. On her personal datapad, she pulled up the casualty reports that were starting to come through. 4,000 dead on the Morning Star. 6,000 on the Infinite Dawn. The numbers kept climbing. 30,000. 35,000. 40,000 lives lost because no one would listen. Someone knocked on her door. It was Ensign Geo. His face was pale. We're retreating. Captain Velrith gave the order to withdraw. How many ships did we lose? Hannah asked, though she already knew. 3 cruisers completely destroyed. 5 more critically damaged. The exact count isn't in yet, but they're saying over 40,000 casualties. Hannah closed her eyes. 40,000 people. 40,000 sons and daughters, parents and friends. All dead because pride mattered more than truth. Some of the crew are saying ... double quotes. Jiho stopped, looking uncomfortable. Saying what? That you tried to warn command. That you knew the attack was coming. Does it matter? Hannah opened her eyes and looked at him. I was right, and they're still dead. Being right doesn't bring them back. Jiho left, and Hannah was alone again. Through the wall, she could hear other crew members talking. Some were crying. Others were angry. She heard her name mentioned several times, but she couldn't tell if they were blaming her or defending her . It didn't matter anymore. She had tried to save them. She had been ignored. And now 40,000 people were dead, and the war was going worse than ever. That night, as the Coalition fleet limped back to base, Hannah made a decision. She would never stay quiet again. Not for rank, not for protocol, not for politics. If she saw something, she would say it, even if no one listened. Even if it cost her everything . Because staying silent had already cost too much . The hull breach came at 340 hours. Hana was in her quarters when the explosion threw her against the wall. Alarms screamed throughout the ship. Red emergency lights flashed on and off. She grabbed her emergency suit and pulled it on as the corridor outside filled with smoke. All hands, this is the bridge. We are boarded. Repeat, Thrain forces are boarding the ship. Security teams to decks 7 through 12. Hannah sealed her helmet and stepped into the corridor. Other crew members were running in different directions. Some headed toward escape pods. Others grabbed weapons and moved toward the breach points. She followed a group of 6 humans and 2 Alcarians toward the emergency stations. That's when she saw them. Thrain soldiers in black armor, moving through the smoke like shadows. They were tall, almost 7 feet, with 4 arms and heads that looked like they were made of sharp angles. Their weapons fired bright blue bolts. One of the Alcarians next to Hedda went down. Then another crew member. The group scattered. Hana ran left, down a side corridor, but 3 Thrain soldiers cut her off. She raised her hands. The soldiers surrounded her. One spoke in heavily accented standard. Weapon. Drop. Hana wasn't carrying a weapon. She showed them her empty hands. The soldier scanned her with a device, then spoke into his come in their own language. 2 more Thrain arrived, and Hana was pushed forward through the damaged corridors of her ship. They gathered 13 prisoners in the cargo bay. Hana recognized most of them. Warrant Officer Minho Choi glared at her as she was pushed into the group. Specialist Jia Li gave her a small nod. The others looked too scared to notice who was there. The Thrain soldiers herded them onto a transport ship. The interior was dark and cold. They sat on metal benches, hands bound with energy restraints that hummed and made Hana's wrists tingle. The transport launched, and through a small window, Hana saw her ship, the Eternal Dawn, drifting with fires burning in 3 sections. "This is your fault," Minho said. His voice was low and angry. Hana looked at him. "What? You heard me. You gave that presentation. You made command look stupid. That's why they didn't listen. If you had just stayed quiet, maybe they would have seen the attack themselves." "I tried to warn them during the battle," Hana said. "I reported the carriers. They ignored me, because you embarrassed them before." Minho leaned forward. "You should have found a way to make them listen. You should have tried harder. Instead, you just gave up, and now 40,000 people are dead, and we're prisoners." Jia spoke up. "That's not fair, Minho." She tried to shut up. Minho turned away. "I don't want to hear it." The transport flew for 20 minutes. When the doors opened, they were in the hangar of a massive Thrain warship. Soldiers separated them. Hana was taken alone, down different corridors from the others. She tried to remember the route, but after the 7th turn, she gave up. They put her in a small room. It had a metal chair, a table, and nothing else. The walls were gray. A single light panel in the ceiling made everything look flat and colorless. Hannah sat in the chair and waited. Hours passed. No one came. Hana's mind kept replaying Minho's words. Should she have tried harder? Should she have refused to leave the war room? Should she have gone directly to Admiral Liu instead of following the chain of command? Finally, the door opened. A Thrain officer entered. He was older than the soldiers, with scars across his angular face. His armor had markings that Hana recognized as high rank. Behind him came another Thrain carrying a datapad. The officer sat across from Hana. He studied her for a long moment. When he spoke, his standard was much better than the soldiers. "I am Admiral Kren. You are Lieutenant Hana Kong, tactical officer of the coalition ship Eternal Dawn." "Yes," Hana said. "You are very interesting." "Lieutenant Kong." Kren placed a datapad on the table. It showed the presentation Hana had given in the war room. We accessed your ship's computers before they activated security lockouts. This is your tactical analysis. Your prediction of our attack. Hannah said nothing. She had been trained not to give information to the enemy, Kren continued. You were correct. About everything. Our approach, our positioning, even our use of carriers. Your analysis was perfect. So I have a question. He leaned forward. Why did your commanders ignore you? I'm not going to answer your questions. This is not interrogation, Kren said. This is conversation between strategists. You saw my plan. I saw yours. In another universe, perhaps we would be colleagues, not enemies. We're not colleagues. You killed 40,000 coalition personnel. Yes, because your commanders ignored you. Kren tapped the datapad. If they had listened, the battle would have been very different. Perhaps we would have been the ones defeated. Perhaps many on both sides would still be alive. But they did not listen to you. Hannah clenched her fists. Why do you care? Because in my culture, we value intelligence, strategic thinking, the ability to see what others miss. Kren stood and walked around the table. Your commanders value rank and politics. They saw a young human female and decided her words had no weight. That is their weakness. And what's your weakness? Hannah asked. Kren actually smiled. It made his face look even more angular. Arrogance. We assumed the coalition would continue making obvious mistakes. You showed us they have at least one person who thinks differently. That makes you valuable. He nodded to the other Thrain, who placed another datapad in front of Hannah. On it were images of the other prisoners. Here is my offer, Kren said. You tell me about coalition fleet deployment, strategic thinking, training methods. In return, your fellow prisoners are treated well. They receive medical care, proper food, decent quarters. And if I refuse, then I begin removing them. One each day, until you change your mind. Kren's voice was calm, like he was discussing the weather. I do not enjoy this. But war demands difficult choices. Hannah looked at the images. She saw Jia's face, Minho's. Others she barely knew. 13 lives in her hands. You won't do it, she said, though she wasn't sure. It would violate the coalition prisoner accords. Your coalition follows those accords. We signed them, but we are not bound by human morality. Kren paused. However, you should know something. I read your psychological profile from your ship's files. You value life. You tried to save your crew by warning them. You will try to save these prisoners too. Then you know I won't help you kill more coalition personnel. Perhaps. Kren walked to the door. Think about it, Lieutenant. I will return in 1 hour. He left. Hannah sat alone, staring at the images on the datapad. 13 people. Some who blamed her. Some who didn't. All depending on what she did next. But the minutes passed, and Kren did not return in 1 hour. Instead, it was 3 hours before the door opened again. Kren entered, and this time he looked different. Less formal. He sat down and pushed the datapad aside. I lied to you, he said. Hannah tensed. About what? About executing prisoners. I would not have done it. That was a test. He met her eyes. I needed to know what kind of person you are. Whether you would sacrifice your principles for others. Whether you would break easily. I don't understand. You passed, Kren said. You refused to help me, even when threatened. That tells me you have integrity. In my culture, that matters more than you might think. He stood and walked to the door, but he didn't open it. Instead, he spoke with his back to her. Tomorrow, I will return. We will discuss tactics and strategy. Not for interrogation. For education. Yours and mine. You have something to teach me about human tactical thinking. I have something to teach you about how real warriors conduct themselves. He glanced back. Your commanders mocked you for being right. I will not make the same mistake. The door opened and closed. Hannah sat in the quiet room, more confused than before. The enemy admiral showed her more respect in 3 hours than her own commanders had in 2 years. It was the strangest feeling. And somehow, the saddest she thought about the 40,000 dead. About Minho's angry words. About Tae-Won's dismissive voice. About Captain Velrith's laughter. And now, about an enemy admiral who called her a strategist, while her own side called her a problem. Hannah put her head in her hands and tried not to cry. But the tears came anyway. Not from fear or pain, but from something deeper. From being seen, finally, by someone who was supposed to be her enemy. Outside the room, guards stood watch. Somewhere on this ship, her fellow prisoners were locked away. Somewhere in space, the war continued. And somewhere in her heart, Hannah knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The enemy respected her. Her own people did not. That was going to change everything. Admiral Kren returned the next morning. This time, he brought food. Real food, not the nutrient-paced prisoners usually received. Hannah stared at the tray. There was bread, some kind of cooked meat, and a bowl of something that looked like vegetables. Eat, Kren said, sitting across from her. You cannot think on an empty stomach. Hannah was hungry. She had not eaten since before the battle. She picked up the bread and bit into it. It tasted better than anything from the Coalition mess hall. Kren placed a data pad between them. On it was a 3-dimensional map of a star system. This is the Battle of Corvin. 6 months ago. The Coalition won. Tell me how. I'm not discussing Coalition victories with you. I already know how you won. I want to know what you think about how you won. Kren zoomed in on the map. Look, the Coalition fleet came from the south. Standard approach. My forces held the northern positions. We should have had the advantage. Despite herself, Hannah looked at the map. She remembered reading about this battle. Your forces were positioned defensively, but the Coalition brought in those new shield disruptors. You had to fall back. Yes, the technology surprised us. But there is more. Kren pointed to a cluster of ships on the map. Here, 3 human ships broke formation and attacked our supply line. It was not part of the main strategy. Someone improvised. Hannah studied the map more carefully. Captain Somin Ru. She commanded the horizon. I read her report. She saw an opening and took it. Exactly. Kren leaned back. Alcarian commanders do not improvise. Thrain commanders follow the battle plan. But humans see opportunities and adapt. That is what makes you dangerous. If we're so dangerous, why are you losing? Hannah asked. Because your commanders do not trust human instincts. They force you to fight like Alcarians. Like us. They take away your greatest advantage. Kren picked up another data pad. Do you know how many battles the Coalition has won when human commanders led the strategy? Hannah shook her head. 73% victory rate. When Alcarian or other species lead. 41%. Kren set down the pad. The Coalition does not see what they have. They treat humans as junior members. As followers. But you should be leading. Why are you telling me this? Because you should know your value, even if your own people do not. Kren stood and walked to the wall. He pressed something, and the wall became transparent. Outside was space and the Thrain fleet. Dozens of warships floating in formation. My people respect strength, victory, excellence. These things matter more than species or rank. Over the next week, Kren came every day, sometimes twice a day. He brought tactical scenarios, historical battles, theoretical problems. At first, Hana resisted. She gave short answers, revealed nothing. But slowly, she found herself engaged in the discussions. They were not interrogations. They were lessons. Kren taught her about Thrain battle philosophy, about their concept of Kavrith, the warrior's path, about how they viewed honor differently than humans did. And Hana taught him too, though she did not mean to. She showed him how humans thought about problems, how they found creative solutions, how they adapted when plans failed. On the 8th day, a Thrain officer entered during one of their sessions. Sub-Commander Vriss, according to his rank markings. He looked at Hana with clear disgust. "Admiral, the command staff wishes to speak with you. They have concerns about your educational methods." Kren did not look away from the tactical display. "Tell them I will join shortly." "Admiral, with respect, treating a prisoner as a colleague goes against protocols. The crew is confused. Some say you show weakness." Now Kren turned. When he spoke, his voice was cold and sharp. "Sub-Commander, do you know the tradition of Kalveth Naran?" Vriss straightened. "The blade that cuts both ways." "Yes. In ancient times, when a Thrain warrior found an enemy of exceptional skill, they would not simply kill them. They would learn from them, test themselves against that blade, because defeating a weak enemy brings no honor. Only by facing the strongest can we become stronger." Kren stood to his full height. This human saw through our tactics. She predicted our strategy perfectly. If her commanders had listened, we might have lost 40 ships instead of killing 40,000 coalition personnel. That makes her a blade worth respecting. Vriss looked at Hana with new eyes. Not friendly, but no longer dismissive. He nodded and left. Kren sat back down. Ignore him. He is young and thinks tradition is weakness. But tradition exists for a reason. Do you really believe that? Hana asked. That I'm worth respecting? I believe you are wasted on people who cannot see value. Kren pulled up a new display. Now, look at this. It is a coalition battle plan we intercepted. They are planning a rescue operation for the prisoners we captured, including you. Hana leaned forward. The plan showed coalition ships approaching from 3 directions. A standard rescue formation. Her heart sank. When? 4 days from now. They think we do not know. Kren met her eyes. But their plan is obvious. They will lose many ships. We will lose some as well. And most of the prisoners will die in the crossfire. Hana felt cold. How many prisoners? Difficult to say. Perhaps 60% casualties. Maybe 70. That meant 8 or 9 of the 13 people from her ship would die. Jia. Maybe even Minho, despite his anger. Others she had served with. You could stop it, Hana said quietly. I could, but I will not. It is a military operation. We will defend ourselves. Kren paused. However, you could stop it. How? Tell me the details you see that I do not. Tell me how to minimize casualties on both sides. Help me position my forces so the rescue can partially succeed without becoming a slaughter. Kren's voice was serious. If you do this, some of your people escape. Some of mine survive. If you do not, many die. On both sides. Hana stared at the battle plan. Her duty was clear. She should not help the enemy. She should not give them any information. That was what her training said. What regulations demanded. But 40,000 people had already died because someone cared more about duty than truth. If I do this, I'm a traitor, Hana said. If you do not do this, you are a killer. Those are your choices. Kren stood. I will return in 1 hour. Think carefully, Lieutenant. When he left, Hana sat in silence. She thought about Tae-Won calling her inexperienced, about Captain Velrith laughing at her, about Minho blaming her for not fighting harder, about 40,000 dead because pride mattered more than being right. And she thought about Kren calling her a strategist, respecting her mind, teaching her things her own commanders never bothered to teach. An hour later, Kren returned. Hana pointed to the battle plan. Here, she said, the Coalition will send their fastest ships first. They'll try to overwhelm your point defense. If you position your heavy cruisers here instead of here, you can force them to spread out. That creates a gap in their formation. Which allows what? Which allows some of their rescue shuttles to get through. They save maybe 30 or 40% of the prisoners instead of losing everyone. But your forces don't get wiped out either, because the Coalition has to retreat. Kren studied the plan. And if I position forces here as well? Then the Coalition commanders will think twice before pressing the attack. They'll rescue who they can and pull back. Fewer casualties. Both sides. You are saving lives on both sides. Kren made notes on his datapad. This is wisdom. Not betrayal. My commanders won't see it that way. Then your commanders are fools. Kren finished his notes. But history will prove you right, Lieutenant, as it always does for those who choose life over pride. 4 days later, Hana heard the battle. Even in her cell, she felt the ship shake from weapons fire. Alarms rang in the distance. The fighting lasted 3 hours. When it was over, Sub-Commander Vriss came to her cell. His expression was unreadable. 6 of your fellow prisoners have been rescued. 4 were killed in the crossfire. 3 remain in our custody. He paused. The Coalition knows someone gave us information about their attack plan. They know it was you. Hana closed her eyes. What happens now? Now the Coalition has declared you a traitor. They have announced you will be executed if you are recovered. Vriss turned to leave, then stopped. Admiral Kren asked me to tell you something. He says a warrior serves life, not flags. He says you understood this when your own commanders did not. When Vriss left, Hana sat on her bunk and tried not to shake. She had saved lives. Maybe 30 people who would have died were now safe. The Coalition had not lost as many ships as they would have, but she was branded a traitor. Her own people wanted her dead, and the only person in the entire war who respected her was the enemy admiral who held her captive. Hana laughed. It was either that or cry. She laughed at the absurdity of it all. She had tried to save lives before the battle and was ignored. She had saved lives during the rescue and was condemned. She had done everything right, and somehow everything had gone wrong. Somewhere on a Coalition ship, the rescued prisoners were being debriefed. Gia was safe. Others, too. They would tell command what happened. They would testify about Hana giving information to the enemy, and no one would ask why. No one would care that she saved lives. They would only see the betrayal, not the reason behind it. That was the difference. Hana realized. The Coalition cared about rules. The Thrain cared about results. And she had just proven she was more like the enemy than her own people. That thought should have scared her. Instead, it just made her sad that the rescue operation changed everything. On the Coalition flagship Resolute, the rescued prisoners were questioned immediately. Specialist Jia Li sat in a sterile white room, facing 3 officers across a metal table. "Tell us again about Lieutenant Kang," said General De Yin Beek. He was the military prosecutor, brought in specifically for this case. "I already told you," Jia said. Her voice was tired. They had been questioning her for 6 hours. Hana was separated from us. We barely saw her. I don't know what she did or didn't do. But you heard the Thrain guards talking. What did they say? Gia hesitated. They said the Admiral spoke with her often, that he treated her differently than other prisoners. Differently how? With respect. Gia looked down at her hands. Look, I know how this sounds, but Hannah wouldn't betray us. Not without a good reason. General Daoyun made a note on his data pad. Captain Wujin Han said the same thing. That Lieutenant Kong saved lives by providing limited intelligence. Do you agree with his assessment? Yes, the rescue should have been a massacre. But it wasn't. Someone helped make sure more of us survived. Someone helped the enemy kill 4 of your fellow prisoners. Someone helped save the other 6. Gia met his eyes. Sir, if Hannah did give them information, she did it to save lives. That's who she is. In another room, Warrant Officer Minho Choi was giving a very different testimony. She's a traitor, Minho said flatly. She made the Admiral like her. Then she gave him our battle plans. 4 people died because of her. You believe Lieutenant Kong deliberately caused those deaths? Colonel Yuna Shin asked. She sat with her arms crossed, her face hard. I believe she cared more about impressing the Thrain than protecting her own people. She was always too smart for her own good. Always thought she knew better than everyone else. Did she ever say anything that suggested disloyalty before the capture? Minho thought about it. She complained. About not being listened to. About commanders ignoring her ideas. She acted like she was better than the rest of us. On the Thrain flagship, Admiral Kren stood before Chancellor Thoreaus. The supreme leader of the Thrain Empire was not pleased. You taught a prisoner our tactics, Thoreaus said. His voice was like grinding stone. You showed her our strategic philosophy. You treated an enemy as a student. I followed the old ways, Kren replied. The Calveth Naran, the blade that cuts both ways. The old ways are old for a reason. They belong in the past. Thoreaus walked around Kren in a slow circle. This human, she gave you information. Yes, but she also learned from you. When she returns to her people, she will use what you taught he. Are against us. She will not return to her people. They have declared her a traitor. Then she is no use to anyone. Thoreaus stopped in front of Kren. Kill her, publicly. Show the coalition we do not harbor their traitors. No, the word hung in the air. Other officers in the room shifted uncomfortably. No one said no to the Chancellor. Explain yourself, Admiral. She acted with honor. She saved lives on both sides. To kill her for this would violate everything we claim to value. Kren stood straight, meeting Thoreaus' eyes. If we kill her, we prove the coalition right about us, that we are savages who understand only death. And if we keep her, we prove ourselves weak, sentimental, unable to do what war demands. Thoreaus turned away. You have 3 days, Admiral. Find a solution, or I will find it for you. Back on the coalition flagship, the senior command staff met in a secure room. Admiral Liu sat at the head of the table. Around him were 6 other high-ranking officers, including Colonel Yuna and Commander Taewon. The evidence is clear, Yuna said. Lieutenant Kang gave intelligence to the enemy. 4 prisoners died in the rescue attempt. She is a traitor and should be executed when recovered. If recovered, Admiral Liu said, the Thrain still hold her. And 3 others. Then we should demand her return. For trial and execution. Make it clear we do not tolerate traitors. Taewon spoke up. I agree. Lieutenant Kang was always a problem. Insubordinate. Disrespectful. She embarrassed human officers in front of our alien colleagues. This treason is just the natural conclusion of her character. Admiral Liu looked at him. You were her commanding officer, Commander Park. Did you ever formally discipline her for insubordination? No, sir. I reassigned her to minimize the damage she could cause. I see. Admiral Liu pulled up reports on his screen. I've been reviewing her service record. Every tactical analysis she submitted was rated highly by the computers. Her prediction accuracy was 92%. That's higher than any other tactical officer in the fleet. Computers don't account for military discipline, Eunice said. Being smart doesn't excuse betrayal. No, but it does make me ask why we didn't listen to her. Admiral Liu pulled up another document. This is her analysis before the Battle of Helion Prime. She predicted exactly how the Thrain would attack. Everything. Ship positions, timing, the use of carriers in a rear assault. All of it. The room was quiet. Captain Velrith ignored her warning. Admiral Liu continued. Commander Park had her removed from her post for giving the warning. And then 40,000 Coalition personnel died exactly as she said they would. That's not a coincidence. That's a failure of command. Sir, are you suggesting? Eunice started. I'm suggesting we examine our own actions before we execute someone for trying to save lives. Admiral Liu stood. The rescue operation should have been a bloodbath. Standard tactical analysis predicted 70 to 80% prisoner casualties. We lost 4 out of 13, less than a third. Someone helped reduce those casualties. The enemy helped, Taewon said, because Lieutenant Kong gave them our plans. Yes, and by doing so, she saved lives. On both sides. Admiral Liu looked around the table. I want every officer here to ask themselves a question. If you knew that sharing limited information would save 30 soldiers, would you do it? Even if it technically violated protocol? No one answered. This hearing is postponed, Admiral Liu said. We'll reconvene when I have more information. Dismissed. After the meeting, Admiral Liu called Captain Wu Jinhan to his office. Wu Jing was one of the rescued prisoners, a veteran officer with 20 years of service. Tell me the truth, Captain, Liu said. What happened on that Thrain ship? Wu Jing took a breath. Lieutenant Kong saved our lives, sir. The Thrain knew about the rescue operation. They were positioned to slaughter everyone. But someone adjusted their deployment, created gaps in their formation, gave our rescue shuttles a chance to get through. You think that was Lieutenant Kong? I know it was. The Thrain guards talked. They didn't care if we heard. They said their admiral respected the human strategist. Saihichi convinced him to fight with honor instead of brutality. Wu Jing looked directly at Liu. Sir, Hana Kong is not a traitor. She's the best tactical officer in the fleet, and we're about to execute her for being better at her job than we deserve. That night, while the Coalition debated Hana's fate, something else was happening. Both fleets were maneuvering for position. The Thrain were preparing a final offensive. Coalition intelligence reported that the Thrain had activated their Doomsday Protocol. It was a weapon system that hadn't been used in 200 years. A series of quantum bombs that could wipe out an entire fleet. But the bombs didn't discriminate. They would destroy everything in a 3-light-year radius, including the ships that launched them. The Thrain were preparing for mutual annihilation rather than accept defeat. On the Thrain flagship, Kren received the orders. He read them twice, hoping he had misunderstood. But the words were clear. In 48 hours, the Thrain fleet would engage the Coalition in a final battle. Win or lose, they would activate the quantum bombs. Everyone would die. Thrain, Coalition, all of them. Kren walked to Hannah's cell. He opened the door without knocking. Hannah looked up from her bunk. We're going to die, Kren said. All of us? Your fleet, mine, everyone. He explained about the quantum bombs, about the Doomsday Protocol, about how Thrain culture preferred mutual destruction over the shame of surrender. That's insane, Hannah said. That's honor. To our people. Kren sat down heavily. I have spent my life believing in these traditions. In Kavrith. In fighting with excellence. But this is just suicide with extra steps. Hannah stood up. Her mind was already working. There has to be a way. Some tactical solution that prevents both sides from destroying each other. There is no tactical solution. The orders are absolute. Then we change the situation. We make it impossible for either side to keep fighting. Hannah started pacing. What if both sides knew each other's weaknesses? What if continuing the battle became pointless because everyone knew exactly how to defeat everyone else? Kren looked at her. You want to give both sides complete tactical information about each other. Yes, make the battle plans obsolete. Force both sides to negotiate instead of fight. That would be the ultimate betrayal of both sides, or the ultimate act of service. Hannah stopped pacing and looked at Kren. You said a warrior serves life, not flags. Prove it. Help me save everyone, even if it means we both become traitors. Kren stood. He walked to the door, then turned back. If we do this, they will try to execute both of us. Your people and mine. I know. And you're willing to accept that? I'm already a traitor to the coalition. Might as well be a traitor to everyone equally. Hannah smiled grimly. Besides, being right got me here. Might as well keep doing it. Kren made a decision. He had made many decisions in his long military career, but this was the first one that felt completely right. Come with me, he said. We have work to do. Together, they walked through the corridors of the Thrain flagship. Guards looked confused, but didn't stop them. No one questioned the Admiral. They reached the communications center. What you're about to see, Kren said to the communications officers, you will not speak of to anyone. Understood? They nodded. Kren opened a channel. Not just to the coalition fleet, but to everyone. Every ship on both sides. Every commander, every crew member. He made it impossible to block or filter, and then he gave Hannah the microphone. She looked at it for a moment. Then she started talking, and what she said would change everything. The transmission reached every ship in both fleets simultaneously. Hannah's voice, clear and steady, filled communication channels that were supposed to be secure. This is Lieutenant Hannah Kong of the Coalition Fleet. I'm speaking from the Thrain flagship. What I'm about to tell you will save your lives. On the Coalition flagship, Admiral Liu stared at the screen in shock. Around him, officers scrambled to trace the signal. Cut that transmission, Colonel Yuna shouted. Can't, sir, a communications officer replied. It's being broadcast on every frequency. Military, civilian, emergency channels. All of them. On Thrain ships, Chancellor Thoros stood frozen in his command center. Who authorized this? Admiral Kren, Chancellor. He opened all channels. Hannah continued speaking. In 48 hours, the Thrain fleet will activate quantum bombs. These weapons will destroy everything within 3 light years. Your ships. Their ships. Everyone dies. The Thrain call this honor. I call it murder. She paused, letting that sink in. But here's what you need to know. The Coalition fleet is vulnerable to concentrated ion bursts at frequencies between 4 and 7 gigahertz. Your shield generators can't compensate fast enough. The Thrain know this. They've known it for months. On Coalition ships, tactical officers checked their systems. She was right. It was a weakness in their newer shield technology. The Thrain fleet has a flaw too, Hannah continued. Their quantum bombs require a synchronized activation code from the flagship. If the flagship is destroyed or disabled, the bombs can't be activated. The Coalition now knows this. The Thrain know the Coalition knows this. The Rose turned to his security chief. Is this true? The officer nodded slowly. Yes, Chancellor. It's classified information. Highest level. Hannah's voice kept going. I'm now transmitting complete tactical data to both fleets. Coalition attack patterns. Thrain defensive positions. Supply routes. Communication codes. Everything. I'm making this war impossible to fight because everyone knows exactly what everyone else will do. Data started flooding into computer systems on both sides. Gigabytes of classified information. Battle plans. Ship specifications. Tactical analyses. All of it detailed and accurate. You're probably asking why, Hannah said. Why would I betray both sides? Here's the truth. I tried to save lives before. I warned my commanders about the Thrain attack. They laughed at me. 40,000 people died because pride mattered more than truth. Admiral Liu closed his eyes. He knew she was right. Then I was captured. The enemy showed me more respect than my own commanders ever did. Admiral Kren treated me like a strategist, not a problem. And when I saw a chance to save lives during the rescue operation, I took it. My own fleet branded me a traitor for it. Her voice grew harder. So now I'm a traitor to everyone. Fine, I accept that. But I refuse to let millions die because both sides are too proud to stop fighting. You want to kill me? Stand in line. But first, you'll have to admit I'm right. She took a breath. Here are the facts. The Coalition can now destroy the Thrain flagship before the bombs activate. The Thrain can now tear through Coalition shields in minutes. If you fight, you both lose everything. The only way anyone survives is if you stop. On the neutral station at the border, Ambassador Sora Kim watched the transmission with tears in her eyes. She had known Hannah as a cadet. Bright, determined, uncompromising. Now that young woman was ending a war by betraying everyone. You call this betrayal, Hannah said, her voice echoing through every speaker. I call it service. Real service. Not to flags or governments or ranks. Service to life. To the belief that living matters more than winning. She paused one last time. I'm Lieutenant Hannah Kong. I've given you the tools to destroy each other completely, or to recognize that continuing this war is pointless. The choice is yours. Choose wisely. The transmission ended. For 10 seconds, no one spoke on any ship in either fleet. Then chaos erupted. On the Coalition flagship, Colonel Yuna was screaming. She's given the enemy everything. Every tactical advantage we had. This is treason on a scale we've never seen. She's also made it impossible for the Thrain to use their doomsday weapon, Admiral Liu said quietly. Because now we know how to stop it. Sir, she saved us, Colonel. She saved everyone. Even if it destroyed her own life to do it. Liu stood up. Prepare a shuttle. I'm going to the neutral station. And I'm bringing Ambassador Kim. On the Thrain flagship, Chancellor Thoreaus stormed into the communications center. Admiral Kren stood waiting, his arms crossed. You did this, Thoreaus said. You helped her. You betrayed us. I prevented mutual annihilation, Kren replied. That's not betrayal. That's command. You will be executed for this. Perhaps. But the fleet will survive. Our people will survive. That matters more than my life. Or yours. Kren looked at the Chancellor without fear. You can execute me. But first, explain to our people why you would rather see them dead than alive without victory. Thoreau stared at him. Then, slowly, he turned to his advisors. Prepare for negotiations. At the neutral station, Chancellor, we negotiate. Or we die. The human showed us the truth of that. Thoreaus walked to the door, then looked back at Kren. You invoked Calveth Naran, the blade that cuts both ways. You wanted to test yourself against a worthy enemy. I think you found one. 3 days later, delegations from both sides met at the neutral station. The room was tense. Thrain officers sat on one side, Coalition on the other. Guards everywhere, they brought Hana in chains. She looked thin and tired, but her eyes were still sharp. She stood in the center of the room, between both sides. "We demand justice," Colonel Yuna said immediately. Lieutenant Kong gave classified information to the enemy. She caused the deaths of 4 prisoners. She violated every oath she took. "We demand justice as well," Chancellor Thoreau said. She revealed our most classified secrets. She made our military strategies worthless. She deserves execution. Admiral Liu stood up. "Before we discuss execution, let's discuss facts." Lieutenant Kong predicted the Battle of Helion Prime with 98% accuracy. Her commanders ignored her. 40,000 Coalition personnel died as a result. That's fact 1. He pulled up documents on the central display. Fact 2. The rescue operation should have had 70 to 80% prisoner casualties. Actual casualties were 30%. Lieutenant Kong's information reduced deaths on both sides. "She still gave intelligence to the enemy," Yuna insisted. "Yes, to save lives." Which brings me to fact 3. Admiral Liu looked directly at Chancellor Thoreau. "Your quantum bomb plan. Were you really going to activate it?" The room went silent. Thoreau didn't answer immediately. Then he nodded. "Yes, mutual destruction was preferable to surrender. That is our way. And now? Now, the tactical situation has changed. As the human said, continuing the war is pointless. Both sides know too much about each other. So she saved both fleets, both civilizations, by committing treason against both." Admiral Liu sat down. "That's not betrayal. That's heroism. That's violating chain of command," Taewon said. "Military discipline requires." Commander Park. Admiral Liu's voice was cold. "You are the officer who reassigned Lieutenant Kong after she tried to warn us about the Thrain attack. You are the officer who publicly humiliated her for being right. You do not get to speak about military discipline when your own failures cost 40,000 lives." Taewon's face went pale. He sat down and said nothing. Admiral Kren stood up from the Thrain side. "I have something to say. In Thrain culture, we have a tradition. Kavrith, the adoption of a worthy enemy as clan. By doing so, their actions become my responsibility. Their crimes become mine. What are you saying?" Thoreau asked. "I invoke Kavrith for Lieutenant Hana Kong. Her actions are now mine. If you wish to execute someone for what happened, execute me." Kren looked around the room. "But before you do, ask yourself this question. Do we punish excellence? Do we execute those who save lives? If we do, we prove we care only about obedience, not about truth." The room erupted. Thrain officers argued in their own language. Coalition officers shouted at each other. Hana stood in the center, watching it all with a strange calm. Finally, Ambassador Sora Kim stood. Everyone quieted down. "I've known Lieutenant Kong since she was a cadet," Sora said. "She was brilliant then, uncompromising. She believed in doing what was right, even when it was hard. Especially when it was hard." Sora walked over to Hana. "You were right about the battle. Right about the rescue. Right about the quantum bombs. Every time you spoke truth, you were punished for it. By your own commanders. By your own people." She turned to face the room. "And now we sit here, alive because of her, debating whether to kill her for saving us. What does that say about us?" General Do-Yoon Beek, the military prosecutor, stood up. "I've reviewed all evidence. Every tactical report. Every communication. every testimony from rescued prisoners. He paused. "I'm dropping all charges against Lieutenant Kong." "General, you can't," Yuna started. "I can and I will. The evidence shows she acted to preserve life, while following orders would have resulted in mass casualties. She did not commit treason. She prevented genocide." He looked at Hana. "Lieutenant, you are free." The chains were removed. Hana rubbed her wrists, not quite believing it. Chancellor Thoreau spoke. "The Thrain Empire will not pursue execution. Admiral Kren has invoked Kavrith, and we respect that tradition." The human showed honor in her own way. Colonel Yuna stood up angrily. "This is wrong. She broke every rule. She was right, and we were wrong," Admiral Liu said firmly. "Colonel, you're dismissed. Please reflect on what military service actually means." Yuna left, her face red with anger. But she left. The negotiations continued for hours. Prisoner exchanges, ceasefire terms, trade agreements. The war didn't end completely, but it de-escalated. Both sides pulled back, started talking instead of fighting. And through it all, Hannah sat in a side room, staring out at the stars. Gia found her there. "Hey," Gia said softly. "You okay?" "I don't know what I am." Hannah looked at her friend. "I did the right thing." "I know I did. But it cost everything. You got your life. Your freedom? Did I? Everyone will always know. The officer who betrayed both sides. Who can trust me now?" Gia sat down next to her. "The people who matter. The ones who understand that sometimes doing right means standing alone." 6 months later, Hannah stood in a coalition uniform with new rank insignia. Commander. She had been promoted and given command of a new tactical training division. Her job was to teach young officers how to think creatively, how to adapt, how to question orders when orders were wrong. The classroom was full. Not just humans, but Alcarians too. Even a few Thrain observers in the back, part of the new exchange program. "They'll tell you the enemy is out there," Hannah said, looking at the faces watching her. "Sometimes that's true. But the real enemy is something else. It's the belief that rank matters more than reason. That pride matters more than lives. That following orders is more important than doing what's right.